Okay, in part 4 of the series, we are going to have a look at our static meshes. As I already mentioned, there are static meshes in here, for example this one. They are much too high in resolution. We have over 500,000 triangles in there. And for the Quest, we want the whole scene to have like 100,000 triangles visible on screen. So we need to reduce the poly count quite a bit. But for some assets like this blanket here or this one here, there's so much little details in there. One thing, this won't look good on the Quest, and the other thing is that this would need a high poly count. So I would go in there and delete this blanket and do the same for this one here. And you can basically check out the polygon count if you go to your optimization view modes and look at the quad overdraw. But you have to keep in mind that this is just for a desktop PC, so they say it's fine, but for mobile, something like this is much too high resolution. If you, for example, if we go in here and select this super small part that is nearly visible at the top of the at the ceiling, you can see that it has over around 90,000 triangles. So this is really, really high resolution. So the best way would be to go into your 3D modeling software and reduce it. But we can also use the Unreal tools for that. So we can open up the static mesh, and there we have our reduction settings. And under percent triangles, you can define how much triangles this mesh should keep. So for example, this is a very small piece, and let's turn on the wireframe. And there are a lot of triangles that you don't really need. So we could turn this down to something like 5% or so. And because it's only visible at the ceiling from the distance, we won't really recognize the difference. So if we go to something like here, and let's compare it. Let's say we go down to 5% of the triangles and click apply changes. We now have 85,000. And if we apply the changes, you can see that now we have only 4,000 triangles left. And this is really, really enough. I think we can go even further. Let's make 2%. We only want to really keep the base silhouette of it. Yeah, something like this. Now we have 1,700. That is very high for something like this. We can, if we model this, we can go away with something like 200 triangles at most. But for this example, I think it's fine. And we now have to go in every mesh here and really reduce the size of it. So let's continue with something like the pillows. And you really have to try on how low you can go. Something like the blankets, we want some details because we want to have some of these foldings here. Let's try with 5%. And you can see nothing has really changed that much, but now we only have 3,000 triangles left. And something like this looks much better performance-wise for a mobile kit. So let's save it. And we want to go in there now that we would know 5% is good. Let's go in there and change it for all our pillows. You can also see that the light map is deleted. So we would need to rebuild our lighting. And that's the reason we only did it in the basic lighting. So now we have our pillows. Let's do the couch. And here you can also see 400,000 triangles. That's really a lot. Another thing that is really bad here for mobile is that we have 5 different materials. So for every material, you have a separate draw call. So basically, if this mesh has 5 different materials, or 5 different in general, it could be the same material, it would render 5 times. So we have like 2 million polygon triangles here that need to render, and this is so much expensive. And if we look at this, we only need 2 materials. So we would need the one here with the fabric and one here for the wood part. So we would only need 2 materials, not 5 of them. So we could also gain a lot of performance if we go in there and remove all those materials. And we will do it for this mesh. So first of all, let's try to reduce it. Also, let's start with 5%. Now we can go even lower, I think. And let's open up our 3D application in the meantime. So we are down to 8,000 triangles, and we haven't lost any big detail if you look on the silhouette. So we have a nice low resolution polyframe. It would be even better if we would delete something like the invisible faces on the backside here or something like this. So you could even go in there and really optimize these meshes further. But for a quick demonstration of what you should do, I think this is appropriate. So let's save it. And let's find it in the content browser, export it. Let's make a new folder here. We don't need vertex color, any level of detail or collision. Also no morph targets in there. And we don't need to export any animation time. So export everything. Let's open up the folder. And bring the mesh into Maya. So here's the mesh. You can already see that Maya is finding some errors. So we can go in there and repair the mesh. Mesh repair. And clean up matching polygons. We don't want faces with holes, non-planar faces. Edges with 0 length or faces with invalid components. That's fine. Let's click apply. So Maya has fixed it, and you can already see there are faces that are not visible to the user later. So you could also go in there and just delete like those faces or the faces here on the backside. They are already a little bit. But yeah, you won't see it later. So this way you could gain some more performance. But the more important part for this, because those polygons are not that important in this case, but the most important part is the one with the materials. So we would need, let's assign the Lambert 1 to everything. This is our fabric later on. And let's create a new material and call it, this will be our wood material. Let's give it another color and assign it to all of these parts here. So now we have the same mesh, but only with 2 materials in there, and that would gain a lot of performance. So while we're in there, let's also check the UVs because they are not beautiful at all. Let's delete all the other UV maps. So now we only have one UV channel, and let's do an auto mapping. Should be fine for this mesh and should be better than the one we had previously. We could go in there and pack this because something like this is not good at all. So we can stack them so we don't lose a lot of place here. But we could also use the algorithm from the packing. So let's go in there and go into our layout settings. The packing resolution for this, I think, would be 512 later on. Let's rotate, but only 90 degrees. And the rest should be good to go. Fix non-manifold. We had already done that, so that this should work. So let's press apply, and now Maya needs to calculate a little bit, and we should get a much better result. Okay, now you can see we really have a, yeah, it's not perfect. It would be better if we have made it by hand, but you can see that compared to what we have originally had, this is much, much better. So we can go in there and export our selection. Let's open up the same folder and overwrite our file. And now we can go in there and drop the new created mesh in there. Okay, this won't work because we have changed quite some things. So I would go in there. Let's do it this way. I copy my location and then I delete this mesh here. Force delete. And once it is deleted, I can go in there, import the mesh again. I don't want to have generate collision turned on because I'm doing my own ones there. The rest should be good. I want to combine my meshes and I don't want to create any materials, so do not create any materials. And let's import it. So now if I drop it in the scene and paste my location, I have it on the same on the same location. But as you can see, this is really a bad example because the mesh was scaled, and normally you should avoid scaling this the mesh. So let's do it right. I'm changing it to unlit that I can better see what is happening here. So he has deformed it quite a bit. So let's use something like this and even smaller. Yeah, this should work. And you normally don't want to have things like this. It's not good for the baking and for the light map calculation. So let's do it the right way. Let's open up Maya again, select the mesh, and let's copy our scales. So we have on the x-axis, let's copy it over. But Maya is with point, and the other one is 1.12. And now let's also fix where it is located. So let's snap the pivot to the top bottom here, and let's snap it to the grid. And now we have the mesh in the right proportions and at the right place. Let's freeze our transform, and everything is clean now. We can export it again and re-import it here. So right-click re-import. And now we can reset the scaling here. And also set it to 0 on the x-axis. And now everything is working fine. So they are a little bit high here, so see that it's not floating. We may need to adjust those a little bit, because we don't want any floating pillows here. Okay, I'm not quite sure if we need collision for this, because we would only need accurate collision if we have something like, in the example I make this frame, be able to be picked up and to walk around with it. So we would need some collision. I could edit this in Maya, but I can also go in there, turn on simple collision, and let's add a box simplified collision. And let's do a more accurate one. So let's do one for here. So it basically fits this part here. And now I can duplicate it. One for the left side and one for the right side. And of course there are more accurate ways of doing this, but for this example, an approach like this would work. So we don't spend too much time here. Just a basic collider. Let's turn it around and scale it up. Okay, now we have a very basic collision, but it's working for the case we need, so this is good to go. Let's save it up, and now if we open up our player collisions, you can see that this is working good. And the player collision may be something we're going to fix later for the other objects, but in this case it's fine. Okay, so this is basically everything you need to do with the meshes. So I would really suggest that you go in there for all of these meshes and change the resolution, because there are things like, for example, this claw folder here. Let's open it up. And you can see 175,000 polygons. Let's go down to, let's try 5% and apply changes. There's no visual impact, so let's go to 1%. And you can see, even if we set this to 1, you don't have any visual loss. And now we have 1,000 instead of 175,000 triangles. So let's save this up. And yeah, just go in there and for every asset, reduce the size and really compare to what is visible and what is not visible. So we meet in the next tutorial, and then I would have also changed everything for all the meshes. And there are some things in there. You don't need to do this material thing for every actor, but for example, this TV has a lot of polygons, especially here on the back side. that you don't see anyway. So you can also go into your 3D application and just delete those parts or just put a basic plane in there. And also 2 materials would be enough for the material if we remove this little logo down there, because only because of this logo, this mesh renders 3 times. So this is not good at all. The same is true for something like this. It has 5 different materials. This would also work with maybe 2 different materials, because you really need to remember that we are going to watch it in the Oculus and we are far away from it. So we see it like from this height here, and you don't really see that much difference in there. Okay, so in this tutorial we talked about the static meshes and what you can do to optimize those. In the next tutorial we're gonna have a look at the different textures first. Let's start with the textures, because in the textures there are also some things we need to optimize. So see you then.